My boss has the same accent as well. So.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's Bloom Impact Investing webinar. Today we have a wonderful Q&A session with Blaise Porter from Sims Limited. Hi Blaise, welcome.
Thank you so much.
My name is Camille. I am the CEO of Bloom Impact Investing and I will be your host today. But before we start, I would like to acknowledge the First Nations people as on the land on which this meeting is taking place today, which for me is Meanjin, Brisbane. I recognize the country north and south of the Brisbane River as the home of both the Turrbal and Jagera nations. I pay deep respects to the elders, past, present, and future. Welcome again, and thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to see you all. For our new visitors and attendees today, let me quickly introduce Bloom and the purpose of our community events. At Bloom, we empower people to invest, to do well, and fight climate change. We are on a mission to make climate investing easy and accessible. With Bloom, anyone can now invest in a diversified and impactful green fund, all of this throughout a simple mobile app. You can head to our website to learn more. And within our fund, we actually have Sims Limited. So it's my pleasure today to sit down with one of our portfolio company and highlight them because they have been doing such a wonderful job, both in the sustainability space, but also from a financial perspective. Now, part of the mission of Bloom is to offer educational opportunities like this webinar today, to propel the voices of impact investing and sustainable finance experts far and wide. And today we have an absolute ESG expert with Blaise, so I'm really excited for you all to hear from her. And finally, the aim of our community events is to build a community of impact investors and people using their money for good, where we can all build a carbon-free and inclusive economy where people and the planet can thrive. It's a big goal, but I think we can get there. Quick housekeeping. Please note this event is being recorded and the webinar will be made available to the attendees after the event by email and actually will be sent to anyone who has signed up on the Zoom page, even if they weren't able to make it today. And a note from our lawyers, please be aware that the information provided in this webinar is general in nature and does not constitute personal financial advice. Before acting on any information from this presentation, you should consider how appropriate the information is in regards to your objectives, financial situation, and needs. One last thing. This is a safe space, so you can ask any questions throughout the event by typing in the chat, and we'll keep 15 minutes in the end for Q&A with Blaise. So take advantage of her amazing expertise, think about your question, and we'll dive into this at the end. Now let's dive straight in. So let me introduce Sims quickly. And then I'll introduce our speaker. So Sims Limited was actually founded in 1917. They have been around for a while, and Sims provides world-leading services in recycling and circular solutions for technology, but is also expanding into municipal recycling and renewable energy. Their business divisions include Sims Lifecycle Services, Sims Metal, Sims Energy, and Sims Resource Renewal. So from reusing IT assets and cloud infrastructure, which I believe is really where the business has made a huge dent into recycling. They are also recycling copper and aluminium to curbside recycling. Sims is a global recycling giant and major player in the circular economy. In 2021, they have generated 5.9 billion in sales revenue. Is that correct, Blaise? It's absolutely phenomenal. And the company is forecast to post earnings per share of $2.67 for the next year compared to 1.14 last year. So amazing trajectory. But Sims also has extraordinary climate goals, and they have brought forward their climate targets and have committed to becoming carbon neutral by 2030. No small task for such a big company, and aims to be net zero by 2050. Their impact, I'm not going to steal Blaise thunder, but across the years have been absolutely phenomenal. I'm just going to throw a few numbers at you. So the business has been able to repurpose 2.1 million cloud infrastructure units. They have recycled 8.6 million tons of secondary metals. Again, I can go on and on, but I'll let Blaise explain this later. I'm going to also introduce Blaise, our speaker today. So Blaise, you are the Group Director for Sustainability and Social Responsibility, a huge role for such a big group. So Blaise, you direct and oversee the execution of Sims Limited long-term sustainability ambitions and goals, and you help the business integrate sustainability throughout the company divisions worldwide and ensure that the company's sustainability strategy enhances business performance. I love this bit because it's all about how ESG performance can also enhance the business as a whole. Mm-hmm. You help the business mitigate risk and you help the company align its purpose. And I believe the why of the company is to create a world without waste and to preserve our planet. Such a wonderful game. So thank you so much for joining us and welcome again.
Thank you so much, Camille. I'm really excited to be here and to talk to the Bloom community today.
Awesome. So let's dive in. I have lots of questions for you today. So we're going to start with you. Can you tell us about yourself, your journey? How did you come about to leading Sims Sustainability and Social Responsibility?
Yeah, sure. So I've only been at Sims for a fairly short time, really. So started at Sims about 8 months ago, so towards the tail end of last year. But definitely still 8 months in, feel like I'm learning something about us every day because, as you mentioned, we are a huge global organisation with lots of different things that we do. So it's been an awesome learning journey over the past couple of months. I think, so prior to that, I was in a similar sort of role as the Director of Responsible Business for Fujitsu Australia and New Zealand. And they're part of the global multinational Fujitsu, which is a large IT outsourcing and solutions business. So I definitely really love as well Bloom's use of the app to kind of involve more people and to kind of help people have a new pathway into equitable investing. That's something that really resonates with me very deeply. And in Fujitsu, I'd moved into the sustainability space from the operational side of the business. So I really am kind of very grateful to that career trajectory because I think if you as we said, we're all around aligning sustainability to help the business achieve what it needs to achieve. And it's just an incredibly luxurious position to be in at Sims because what the business is aiming to achieve is enabling circularity and delivering an outcome that the world really needs. And so, when this opportunity presented itself, it was kind of like, like it's, it's an amazing Australian business, as you mentioned, 104 years old, first yard. Actually, I'm in Sydney, and I'm on Gamaragal country today, but the first yard was in Newtown, so not that far. And now we're over 150 facilities globally. So it was just an incredible opportunity to help advance, Sims' sustainability agenda, and to really be able to, do what we do very well, at a scale where we're helping to solve some of these urgent decarbonisation challenges. So I really love it. I feel like, it's a fantastic job to have, and it's a fantastic company to be in because, that mindset of sustainability is so strong in what we do.
That's phenomenal. Thank you. And Yeah, absolutely. Huge the impact you can have in this job. So yeah, thank you for sharing your career trajectory. Now, I'd love to zoom in on Sim's mission and role into the world's decarbonization. So can you, obviously the business is tackling different business verticals, metal recycling, municipal recycling, renewable energy. Can you tell us more about Sim's mission and where do you think it plays in the world's transition?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess you mentioned there Sims why, so our purpose, which is to create a world without waste, to preserve our planet. And that really informs everything that we do, and that absolutely informs our own decarbonisation journey as well. So I'll kind of come back to that. But if I look at, the business, obviously metal recycling is their core business and kind of what we're very often most known for. And as you mentioned there, over 8.5 million tonnes of ferrous, so kind of steel products, and non-ferrous metals like copper and aluminium recycled last year. So how that works, I suppose, is that Sims will take in scrap metal. Simple as that. So that might be anything from post-production scrap through to, end of life refrigerators or appliances or cars, and recycle them in our facilities. So at our facility, we'll depollute them. So for instance, if it's a fridge, we'll remove the refrigerant gases. If it's a car, we'll remove any fuels or oils and things like that. And then they go through a shredding process. And from that, we're able to recover the metal, and it's in good enough quality that it can leave us. Also, all that steel can leave us and go straight into a smelter to be made into new steel. So we sell to steel producers around the world, that as a key input. And that's really important from a decarbonisation pathway. So I think most of us will know that steel is a really emissions intensive sector, and it has a really challenging decarbonisation pathway because it uses coking coal to make new steel from iron ore. So when we use scrap, that's a really important input because we can use that first of all in an electric arc furnace, so we don't need to have that raw input of coal. That could be conceivably run off renewable energy, so that's kind of one of the key pathways. And even in a more typical kind of blast furnace, you can charge up with scrap. And so that's an energy saving and obviously an efficiency saving as well. And there's some good statistics out from like the World Steel Institute. So basically for every tonne of scrap that is reused, that's a saving of 1.5 tonnes of greenhouse gas pollutants. Yeah. So it's really a critical pathway, and definitely has been acknowledged as one of the key pathways, and certainly one of the only ones that's really available at commercial scale now, right, in this critical decade for action. Because the other pathways that are important to steel are things like green hydrogen and carbon capture and storage, and those are really vital solutions, but they're ones that will take a lot of research and development over the coming years to get them to where they need to be.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think our metals business, we are certainly really excited about our opportunity to contribute to that low carbon economy. And I think the other thing is, obviously steel gets a lot of press. It's it's a bit of a poster child for, the importance of decarbonisation. But other metals that we deal in, like copper and aluminium, are also very energy intensive to make. And they're also metals that will be in really high demand to actually build low carbon infrastructure. So, we need aluminium to go around the edges of solar panels. We need copper to make circuitry in electric vehicles and, distributed grids and, all sorts of, small and large scale renewable energy infrastructure. So these are really commodities that are going to be super important to delivering, decarbonisation outcomes for the entirety of society, where we can provide, a circular input that's really high quality. So that's our core business. And as I said, we're really excited about the contribution that we can make to a low carbon economy. You also mentioned Sims Lifecycle Services business, or SLS. And this is the business that deals with end-of-life electronic product. And we like to kind of call it recycling the cloud. So it's easy to think about the cloud kind of being out there, and just
it is actually not in the clouds.
No, it is actually a physical thing. It lives somewhere. And it needs chips and servers and networking devices and cables and all sorts to kind of make it go. So that's what our SLS business does. And they've got a really fascinating mission, really, where we're really focusing on repurposing, reusing, and redeploying. So it's not just like, okay, great, give us your server and we'll crunch it up and reclaim the materials. The first focus on that is how do we keep that device as a whole or a component of that device in use in its original form for as long as possible. So if you have got just a very simple laptop example where you might be a company that's got a fleet of laptops coming out, Sims will take them, clean them up kind of both literally and physically. So we'll wipe all the data off there, put an operating system back on there, clean out any dings, make sure it's got a charger and everything with it. And then it can be redeployed. So it can either go back into the organisation, it might go into an education or a charity partner sometimes, or it'll just be resold and made available as a second-hand asset that has that operating system that goes with it. So it's a really high valuable, usable asset in its original form, and we can do that right down to the level of a chip. So for instance, one of the kind of impacts of COVID that we heard a lot about was there was a microchip shortage because all the factories shut down. And they were all operating on a just-in-time model, so there wasn't this huge kind of backlog of, oh yeah, here's your chips. So the place where you could get chips was the ones that already existed in the devices that you already had. And so we've really spun up almost a new model in that business of doing, chip recovery where they can be, removed from devices and redeployed, at that level, right, at the level of the tiny chip. So that's certainly a really exciting business also. And again, we all live increasingly digital lives now. As we have technologies like 5G come to the fore, what we know is that, there will be increasing volumes of these end-of-life devices coming out. And it's awesome that we've got the capability to keep those things in use for as long as we possibly can. And then the other division, I think, that what I'm super excited about is Sims Resource Renewal. And so if I go back to the metals business, so if you picture a car or a fridge, say, and it goes through a shredder, then there's quite a lot that's not metal as part of that. So it might be glass or the plastic dashboard or the rubber seals on your fridge. And at the moment, that all just comes out as what we call automotive shredder residue, ASR. So it's a very straightforward name, but that's waste. It goes to the landfill. And that's, not really comfortable with us from a purpose point of view, Camille. Our purpose is a world without waste. And also commercially, landfill costs are only going one way, right? I think we all know that. So what we're doing is we're investing in advanced resource recovery technology here in Australia. So it's actually going to be in Queensland, our demonstration plan, in our Sims Resource Renewal Factory. And that will use plasma gasification to basically treat that ASR. And it's no oxygen, so it doesn't burn. What it does is just gasify. So it basically breaks all the molecular bonds back up into gas. And so from that, we'll make hydrogen. So, that'll go, again, into the pathway of decarbonising, transport, for instance. So we'll be making commercial hydrogen there, and we'll be making commercial CO2, and it's actually high enough quality that it can be used by the food and beverage industry, which is quite phenomenal if you think about where it came from to making something that can go into making drinks fizzy. And we'll be making a solid aggregate, which we think will have use in construction and in cement. So it'll be a totally circular facility, and the first time certainly that I'm aware of that it's been used with this commodity in this country. So it's really exciting to be able to bring that sort of investment and that sort of innovation here to Australia.
Wow, this is so magical to see all these different linear processes turned into circular economy principles. And I really love how you shared some practical, tangible examples of how that works, right? Because when we think recycling, it can be a bit, I guess, yeah, how to grasp. We think about our own waste, but there are so many other lines of production that needs to be recycled. Absolutely mind-blowing.
Like one of the things that I certainly didn't know before here was that the car is the most recycled consumer product in the world.
Wow.
So yeah, because we kind of think about, oh, like what goes in my yellow bin, like there's milk bottles and whatever, but yeah, there's all these other things, that Sims recycles that we still interact with every day.
Exactly. And from a business perspective, how wonderful to be creating value and new things out of existing things, whilst also reducing the cost of waste and landfill. I mean, it makes, it's like win, 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 win.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's I'm so excited to be able to see that become a reality.
I didn't know about the hydrogen, which is really great news as well, and a area focus for the government, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, very much so.
Awesome. Thank you so much for diving into all these details. I'd love now to move on to the why. So you said the company's direction is to create a world without waste, to preserve our planet. What does that mean to you, I guess, personally, but also what does that mean for Australians and people listening today?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because I think, lots of companies, have a purpose, but you need to be able to translate that into tangible action and kind of show how it drives what it is that you actually are doing. And I think, so what it means for us is, it is about definitely that core as an enabler of the circular economy. So, really taking things that might have been, looked at as a waste, and keeping them in circulation, either in their existing form, like through SLS, so that, higher up or tighter circle, if you like, in the circular economy, and then reusing them. So for things like steel and aluminium, because those are materials that are, essentially really infinitely recyclable. It's not like paper or plastic where every time around that recycling journey, the quality degrades. It is something that, there is still, absolutely metal, in circulation now that would have been, first made during the Industrial Revolution. So it's, it's a fantastic commodity to be able to dealing with. And I think our purpose really calls us towards, innovation in how we deal with that. And obviously SRR and resource renewal as an example that I talked about that. But we are also innovating in, the core business in the metal side. In the US, we've acquired a business, Sims Alumisource, and the whole point of that is around saying, okay, how can we get, in this case, it's aluminium, which you recycle, and aluminium is kind of really interesting metal, and without getting too technical, when it's used for something, it's very often alloyed, so it's it's mixed with something else, so like magnesium, say, or silicon, to give it a different property. So an aluminium window frame is a different metal composition than like an aluminium super yacht or a can or something like that. And so that creates some kind of issues down in the smelting process and remelting it, because you've got to know what you're dealing with in order to be able to do that safely and to do that effectively. And so at the moment, there's a whole bunch of, either manual or automated sorting processes that go into getting smelter ready aluminium. That's a really clean stream. And so we've invested in this acquisition and continuing to invest in this technology, which is really around how do we get it from our yard, right, from our processing, a clean stream that's ready to go into a smelter. So it doesn't need, anybody else to look at it. We're eliminating all those emissions from transporting around, from the process, which could involve, obviously lots of electricity, but a lot of them might involve water and, chemicals to treat that water, etc. It generates a high value product for us, so there's a super commercial return. And it enables the customer to generate, a much higher value product on their end as well, and eliminate all that middle stage there as well. I really think, and you asked, what does that purpose mean for me? And I think for me, it's also really about that preserving the planet part. I think carbon, emissions, they are pollution. They are a form of waste. And so I think that purpose really calls us towards aggressive action on climate. And that's part of the reason why we have brought our climate targets forward, which we announced earlier this year. Because I do, I feel that, really strongly. And it's great that when I'm talking to others at Sims and, to the leadership team at Sims, that value actually does really resonate with them, and they make decisions based on those values.
That's a fantastic segue to my next question, actually, on climate goals. So this past year, so you've brought forward this net zero target, which is wonderful, and congratulations. I think there's been a wave of businesses and institutions who've been making commitment to 2050, but when you look at it closer, you're like, 2050, I think that's a bit too late. I mean, if you spend 5 minutes looking at the IPCC report and you understand that, any commitment to 2050 is actually not very serious. But anyway, comment aside, that's still a huge goal for such a business. So what does that mean in practice to have this carbon neutral target by 2030?
Yeah, so I guess just to be clear as well, so we have brought forward the carbon neutral position from 2042 to 2030, so we've shaved 12 years off that. And as you say, that was really about, responding to what the science tells us in terms of what needs to occur. But we have left our net zero target at 2050. And I guess the distinction that we make, right, is because we know that we can't be fully decarbonised by 2030. It's only 8 years away. That's not a long time.
No.
And we use a lot of equipment like, heavy trucks, like heavy material handlers, front end loaders and things in our yard. And there may not be a, readily available electric or, otherwise low emission options available by 2030. And certainly we won't have the opportunity to turn them over. So not everything will have reached its end of life by then. So we will be using some, high quality verified carbon offsets at 2030. My intent though would always be is that at 2030, that kind of represents the most amount of offsets that we'd ever have to use. Because then as things become more available, we'll continue to draw that
like
down.
Yeah,
right. And that's why we've left there the net zero at 2050, and obviously as soon as we can before that time.
Absolutely. It's Sims is, I think it's worth reiterating that Sims is evolving is in one of the most hard to abate industry. So it's nothing like, I don't know, a technology company, for example, that has much lighter scope 2 and 3 emissions.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting, as you say, it's a really interesting industry to be part of. So we have also committed to an earlier target, which is 100% renewable electricity by 2025. And that's, represents about half of our emissions at the moment. But I guess what we know, right, is that as we displace diesel, we'll be electrifying, you know, in a lot of cases. And so we'll be using more electricity. So we wanted to have that renewable electricity in there really early so that we could get, you know, that full emissions reduction, you know, as we kind of make progress against that goal. You know, I think part of bringing the target forward was also about saying, okay, like what's the governance approach that we need here? So, you know, we're pricing carbon internally now. Last year we produced our first TCFD report all about the risks and opportunities, and, you know, really analysed our strategy against, you know, those range of different possible futures. And you're absolutely right. So we've just finished up measuring our Scope 3 footprint.
Wow.
And so we'll be disclosing that in a couple of months, what that looks like. But
it's a big job. That's exciting.
You're absolutely right, Camille. It was a huge job. And it's a big number. Like most organisations, I think they find that there's, you know, here's their Scope 1 and 2, and then they've got this big Scope 3. You know, because we make a product that is smelted, right? And whichever way you do it, that is a really emissions intensive process. You know, we would always say, of course, like that's, you know, it's such a strong net positive, you know, both from a circular perspective, you know, and from a carbon perspective. But, you know, nevertheless, we'll be absolutely working with our value chain, you know, over that time frame, to understand their plans better and to see, you know, how we can contribute.
That's awesome. Now, Blaise, I would love to take a step back from all the sustainability aspects and dive into the financial success of Sims. And I love tackling this question in my events, because there's a myth around, you know, investing sustainably means compromising on returns. And I'm here to, I guess, educate and share examples of financial success from companies who are doing the right thing. So can you tell us and unpack the link between the ESG, the strong ESG practice that Sims has been able to implement to the financial success? And just to give everyone context, I'm just going to throw again a few facts around that financial success. So Sims Limited, 5.9 billion in sales revenue in 2022. The earnings per share has been almost doubling for next year. And the 1 year shareholder return, if my numbers are correct, were 9.5%, 14.6% including dividends, compared really well versus the 2.3 industry standard and the broader market negative return of 3%. So there's a clear financial performance, and there's another performance in your I'm going to call it benchmark, it's not the right term, but in your industry. How much of this has been driven by ESG?
And for Sims, it's kind of a tough question to separate, because we are a sustainability pure play, and there's not a lot of, you know, sustainability pure players that are, you know, $6 billion businesses. But I think, you know, I do completely agree with you, right? I think it's no compromise, you know, and I think, in fact, having strong ESG practices, you know, from governance through to measurable actions, you know, is just almost the standard operating landscape now. You know, I think obviously there's a ways to go for many businesses, but it's also just fundamentally about what good risk management looks like and how you test out the effectiveness of your strategy so that you are going to get those growth returns that you think you're going to get. You know, I think it's a tough one, because climate change, you know, certainly does mean that some of the assumptions we've all made about all sorts of things will no longer be true. You know, and so, yeah, that's why I think doing things like the TCFD analysis and setting those internal carbon pricing that we've done at Sims is actually really helpful, because it does enable us to kind of test that out, you know, to model the impact of that and to make sure that our strategy is the right one. I think, for us, we certainly see, those ESG trends around, decarbonisation, around moving to lower carbon infrastructure, as I said, as a really strong tailwind. The global supply of high quality metals is absolutely going to be essential to doing that. And we think that, we are extremely well placed, in the future, as the world, moves towards these sorts of technologies and, these sorts of low carbon circular economies.
I love this. And in fact, just to continue on this idea, I read a really interesting report from McKinsey yesterday. And they had this term that I'm going to reuse again now, called the great reallocation of capital. So it's this idea that essentially capital is going to be reallocated towards companies and organizations that are well positioned on our carbon transition. And this is just creating new wonderful opportunities. I think that was a 12 trillion annual potential for the net zero transition. And this is spread across, I have the report here, waste, industrials, carbon management, hydrogen, agriculture and land use, power, water, buildings, transport. And I love this because I think in the last maybe 5 or 10 years, there's been a huge, in terms of retail investing, a huge appeal to invest in the big companies that everyone love and use, Netflix and Amazon. And I'm not saying that these companies are, I'm not giving any financial advice here, but I love climate investing because it invests in the future and it invests in practical things that we need right now. No matter whether you believe or not in climate action, what happens to your fridge? We all have a fridge. We all have a car. We all want a chip in our new computers. So I think it's so great to just raise awareness around this. But I digress. I have other questions for you. We probably have 5 more minutes of Q&A, just you and I, and then I'll I'll ask the audience to ask your questions. So attendees in the audience, prepare your questions. You will be able to talk to Blaise directly. One thing I wanted to ask, again, I know you cannot give financial advice either, but because you are, I guess, in the trenches of the ESG industry, what is your tip for us investors when we try to assess companies in the recycling and circular economy space? Any particular rating, ranking we should look at? There's a ton of greenwashing out there. Who can we trust?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, Camille, there's no one rating.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was going to answer the question. I think, rating agencies that publicly disclose their methodologies and the results are always going to be more useful for investors, particularly those that take a materiality lens. I think that that's really important, rather than just saying, okay, how do you score against these 15 things? Which ones are most material for that industry?
Can you explain what you mean by materiality lens?
Yeah, so you wouldn't apply, I suppose, the same, I guess the impacts of an organisation like Sims will be different than the impacts of another organisation like a Microsoft or a BHP. One might use a lot of water, one might use a lot of electricity. So you want to look at those rating agencies that says, yeah, we've done some research, we've determined what their biggest impacts are, and they should be, ideally both a negative impact in terms of consumption and a positive impact, because companies can do a lot of good, and weight that. So we're not just using, okay, everybody's responding to questions about tailings dams or whatever, if that's not relevant to you. I think that's also it's important to look across multiple rankings, because they do weight different things and they do have different focuses. So, where companies like Sims appear on multiple lists, I think that tends to be a good sign of a really well-rounded approach. But we still do need to do our own research. I think one of the things also that I really like, and go to your earlier point before, Camille, is that I think you do need to look at the product. Like, what's the solution? What is the work that the company is doing? Because your individual mileage of what constitutes sustainability might be different. And, I like the approach that Bloom has adopted in terms of using the work from Project Drawdown to say, yeah, these are solutions that are going to help, lead to decarbonisation. They are going to help drive climate action. Because, yeah, that's where we, again, want to see that action, and it's where we want the corporate sector to take a leading role.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I have a lot of other questions. I'm just thinking about what's the best way to do this. I will, I guess, ask you about, perhaps we can dive into recycling and life cycle services in a bit more details. Can you tell us about so you've talked a lot about solutions. Could you tell us a bit more about the key issues that the world is facing with metal and municipal waste? And how does Sims approach this in a more sustainable way than other players?
Yeah, that is a huge question.
It's a meaty one.
Yeah, absolutely is. So I think that linear economy, which is that, take, make, waste, we all recognise that that's really unsustainable. The Earth has limited resources. We cannot actually just keep extracting things. We need to make the use of what we have. And like, ultimately, that's the kind of your basic definition of sustainability, right? It's meeting our own needs without compromising the needs of future generations or the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And it is really closely linked with climate. So Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who's a great circular not-for-profit, did a huge piece of research just in the last couple of years. And they're like, okay, if we move everything to electrification and we do best-in-class efficiency and we run it all on renewable electricity, that will solve 55% of the problem. The other 45% are all those emissions that are in things like, food, plastic, but aluminium and steel are like also one of those two really big ones. So we won't meet the Paris goals. We won't really get anywhere close until we can get circularity.
Yeah, there's no way around it.
Yep. It is absolutely essential. And obviously, again, the further you can go, up that circularity pathway in terms of also just, using less, that's, and designing our waste. And Sims, we do a lot of work with equipment manufacturers and, with customers to say, okay, how can we design this product better? Both, everybody from car manufacturers through to laptop manufacturers that says, okay, like, how could we design this better? How do we make it, easier to recover parts? Not just for easier to go into a recycling machine, but how could we recover parts and recover metal so we get a higher quality outcome, at that end of life and ready for it to go onto its new life stage. And that's one of the things I think that really differentiates us, is that, we don't ever think about ourselves as operating in the waste industry. We're a circular economy operator, and that really permeates the decisions that we make.
That's a wonderful formula. I like that. One last question. So in the audience, we have impact investors, and the current market have been very volatile and going down. And do you think now is a good time to invest in recycling?
Well, yeah, again, with all the disclaimers on financial advice, I do, right? I think, as I said, these circular solutions, they are solutions that the world needs. they're going to grow in importance, in fact, I think, as we transition to a low carbon economy. These are things that are now structural trends. They're not just like a flavour of the month or, a bit of volatility here or there. These are new structural factors that we're all having to be working towards. And we're all going to be wrestling with wherever we are and what sector we're in is how do we move towards that low carbon circular economy.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's amazing tailwinds in, high quality metals and mega trends that will definitely favor companies like Sims. One last question before we open the floor to the audience. And by the way, reminder, everyone in the audience, feel free to type a question in the chat. I think we've got one. Are there other clean tech or sustainability areas that you are excited about?
Yeah, so just on a personal note, there's a couple. So I think food is really interesting, and that's everything from like smart agriculture and using AI to help food grow and to be more water efficient crops, etc. And then also looking to what is the food that we eat and looking at plant-based alternatives and seeing more of those come to the market and really be embraced, I think, in quite a serious way. From a technology perspective, I also I'm super interested in like just distributed energy, basically. So as we all have solar panels and batteries, and they all come onto this very big grid, but they don't necessarily need to do that. So the ability of communities to form their own grids, microgrids in a council area, and we could trade energy to one another on the blockchain, right? So I think that's a really interesting,
totally,
kind of use case that I'm sure we'll start to see develop.
Absolutely.
Over time. And look, I just do think, nature is obviously a real headline, for all of us, and all of us in this space. And I think, the way in which we develop kind of nature-based solutions and looking at blue carbon in the ocean and things like that, should have so much potential.
Absolutely.
For helping to sustain and preserve nature.
I agree with this so much. We've been looking at technology as a savior, but why don't we just come back to natural solutions that have been working for years? And that makes a lot of sense. We have a question from Lisa in the audience for you, Blaise. So the question is, do you partner with council waste systems or is it industrial focused?
It's a bit of both. So, we will take, and it just depends really. So, we certainly do deal though in both kind of pre-consumer scrap, which is like the manufacturing scrap, and that will come directly to us from the manufacturer. So we'll partner with them, but also post-consumer scrap. So that might come from, like a council waste depot. It might come from somebody who drops it off themselves. If you've ever put your things out on the curb for hard rubbish day and seen somebody come along and snip the cables off the vacuum cleaner, they're bringing those cables to us, and we're the one who's buying them from them. So, we really take metal from all sorts of industries, and that, again, like it could include construction and demolition waste, for instance. So we deal with a lot of that. Obviously, like office defurbishments or data center defurbishments, that's another source of metal. So, as well as the manufacturers themselves. So if, the manufacturer might have a program where they swap over your old fridge when you buy a new fridge, and we'll work with them to give them that traceability, for all those regulatory requirements and all those sustainability outcomes as part of that end-of-life operation.
Thank you, Blaise. That was a complete answer. On this, actually, I have another one. I've noticed recently that Sims was going to open an operation in Rockley, which is in Brisbane. And I thought that was interesting. I'm in Brisbane. I think a couple of people in the audience are also in Brisbane. Can you tell us more about this?
Yeah. So we're already operating in Rockley. So Rockleys are one of our largest sites in Australia, actually, and we have a metal shredding operation there. But what is really exciting about Rockley is that it is going to be the site of our first demonstration plant for Sims resource renewal. And so the intent is there that, ideally we'll be able to kind of create that space where, as soon as the waste gets processed or the ASR, comes out of that metal recycling process, then it can be gasified on site. And so what will leave us is the hydrogen that I spoke about before. So
That's right. Okay.
yeah, so that's that's where the demonstration plant's going to be, is up there in Queensland. So it's quite an exciting time there. And you may have seen also that we have just acquired another site in Queensland out at Pinkenba.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's exciting. So that site has deep water export capability. And so that's really in line with our strategy. So that just means, rather than, get a whole bunch of containers on trucks and all the emissions and transport fuel associated with that, we can actually load onto a vessel directly from our site and get it from where it needs to go. So that's really exciting. And in the longer term, definitely we'll look at the capability of that site to do the integrated recycling and the resource renewal. Obviously working really closely with the community there and the government there. But it's an exciting acquisition that we've just announced quite recently.
Oh, that's so clever. And once again, a great example of, clean energy, creating new jobs and new opportunities for communities, which is such a major, goal for Queensland, right? Transitioning not only the energy sources, but also the industry and the workers, and bringing everyone along the journey. That's wonderful. And this is like a practical example. So that's awesome. We are reaching the end of the event. I'm just going to ask one more time if anyone has a question in the chat. Otherwise, I will just ask you one last question about what is your wish for the future in terms of your own impact with Sims, and maybe just a tip for the audience who are all passionate about making an impact.
Well, okay. So I said, my hope for the future, and I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of belief that we can make a better world, and it's a huge part of what drew me to Sims, is that here's a company that's doing it so directly. And I have two small kids. They're in primary school, and there's nothing like kind of having a a direct stake in the future.
In the future,
yeah. I want them to grow up in a world that's safe. That's it.
It's that simple. It's that
fundamentally. And I want them to be able to experience all the beauty of this country, and go out and do bushwalks and snorkel on the Great Barrier Reef.
And see fish.
Yeah, right. And I want that to be the country that my kids live in, and that everybody else's kids live in, and that to be the legacy, excuse me, that we did what we could, to preserve and to revitalize and to keep this incredibly precious planet. There isn't another one, like we say that like an obvious fact, but we don't have anywhere else to go. So and all the amazing beautiful things on this planet, it's super critical to me. And I love being able to do that as part of my working life. It's a huge privilege. And it's a bit of a tough ask, right, Camille? You've really got an engaged audience here to try and give a tip to. And so I would say, if we haven't already, looked at your superannuation, I think that's probably a good place to start. So it's another part of your money that's out there, that can be directed towards sustainability outcomes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, and obviously keep talking to people. I'm a huge believer in that. Keep the pressure on, so talk, if you're investing, talk to your family and friends about why you're doing that and why you think it's important. Keep spreading the word, spread the change, keep talking to companies like Sims and other companies about what they are doing. Yeah, absolutely. Keep that conversation going. Make sure it's never leaves anybody's mind.
Exactly. It needs to be front and center. And also partner if you work in a business. You can also be an entrepreneur and champion. You don't have to have the ESG title, I think, to drive sustainability in your business. If you see something that is not circular and could be, then just
100%. Yeah, 100%.
I remember working for an e-commerce company. I was just appalled by the a few wasteful ways to do business. But no, things are changing, and I think people are listening now, which is great.
Yeah, well, look, it's been a great joy to me to, over the last kind of decade or so of my career, to see that sustainability professionals are exactly that, right? Like they're a whole class of professionally skilled people, which is unreal. But all those people started off as rabble rousing, right?
Yeah, it was a nice to have, and now everyone's listening.
Exactly. So, that wasn't a professional class of people. It was a class of people that thought, here's a problem that needs solving, and I'm going to make a noise about it. So yeah, whether it's at work or with your council, and keep talking to family and friends. I think it's so critical.
Thank you so much. It's all what we have time for today. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights. I really love how practical and easy to understand it all was when we know how complex the industry actually is. I would love to encourage everyone to have a look at Sims a little bit closer. It's really a wonderful business. And I would love to see you all again for other webinars. We have a really exciting planning actually for the next couple of months. We're going to talk about waste once again with Cleanaway, another business in the waste space. We are going to talk about carbon credits on the blockchain and how this can help decarbonization. We have lots of events coming up, so jump on our website, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter to be the first one to know about our coming events. And yeah, follow us on social media, jump on the app to learn more about all the great companies we invest in. Sims is one of them, but we actually have over 95 different investments. They all are doing wonderful things. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you again, Blaise. Have a wonderful day. And I will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.